Hi, I'm glad you stopped by. This time we're going to do things a little bit different. We're going to look first at the counterfeit spirit of prophecy. And we need to do a little bit of reading in the Bible. It's going to be Ezekiel chapter 9. And we want to do that to get a little background in order to accurately show you the fallacy of this part of the counterfeit spirit of prophecy. So for now, turn to Ezekiel chapter 9, and you can start following along in the first verse. He cried also in mine ears with a loud voice, saying, Cause them that have charge over the city to draw near, even every man with his destroying weapon in his hand. And behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, which lieth toward the north, and every man a slaughter weapon in his hand. And one man among them was clothed with linen, with a writer's inkhorn by his side. And they went in and stood beside the brazen altar. And the glory of the God of Israel was gone up from the cherub whereupon he was to the threshold of the house. And he called to the man clothed with linen, which had the writer's inkhorn by his side. And the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And to the others he said in mine hearing, Go ye after him through the city, and smite. Let not your eyes spare, neither have ye pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house. And he said unto them, Defile the house, and fill the courts with the slain. Go ye forth. And they went forth and slew in the city. So we have a very interesting portion of Scripture that many have looked into, but unfortunately they did not have the authentic spirit of prophecy to guide them. We know that many times angels represent men doing a certain work. Revelation 14 and its 3 angels' messages is a perfect example. But in this case, God has chosen men to represent a spiritual work being done by men. Here is the counterfeit spirit of prophecy. It's a letter, number 106, dated 1909. And it says, Study the 9th chapter of Ezekiel. These words will be literally fulfilled. And this comes from, the first citation is from December 17, 1987. And it says it's the entire letter. Then it says in the second citation, same letter, and it is to the churches in Oakland and Berkeley, same date, but in this particular instance, they only released in 1953 3 paragraphs. So the question is, why did they release only 3 paragraphs? The answer is, I don't know. Here is the truth. It is impossible for Ezekiel chapter 9 and the verses that we just read, 1 to 7, it is impossible for it to be a literal fulfillment. And that, in this letter 106 from 1909, it is the counterfeit spirit of prophecy. So we need to do a little bit of math. So let's say, for the sake of example, that only 1 in 20 will be slain by these men. The SDA Church today claims more than 20 million members. Question: how many people can one man slay in one day with a sword? Answer: let's put the number at 1,000. There's a lot of different discussion online. I looked this up, but there's a lot of discussion about battle and war in those days. But let's say there's no resistance and you can just walk around and stick your sword and execute 1,000 people in a day. Now remember, the letter says literally. Don't think of anything else but a literal interpretation. So now for the math. We have 1 million people, that's 1 in 20 out of the church, divided by 5, because only 5 of the 6 men are actually doing the slaughtering, is what it indicates. That calculates out to 200,000, which means, right, 200 days at 1,000 per day for every day for 200 days. Are we supposed to believe that should 5 men with swords start slaughtering 1,000 people a day, that no one is going to just go out there and shoot all 5 dead? I mean, this letter is a very good example of the ridiculous things the counterfeit spirit of prophecy says. Don't study it and don't believe it. What is the truth? What is actually happening here? So for this, we need to take Testimonies for the Church, number 23, and this is the authentic spirit of prophecy. And here is what it says. The true people of God who have the spirit of the work of the Lord and the salvation of souls at heart will ever view sin in its real sinful character. They will always be on the side of faithful and plain dealing with sins which easily beset the people of God, especially in the closing work for the church, in the sealing time of the 144,000 who are to stand without fault before the throne of God. Will they feel most deeply the wrongs of God's professed people? This is forcibly set forth by the prophet's illustration of the last work under the figure of the men, each having a slaughter weapon in his hand. One man among them was clothed with linen, with a writer's inkhorn by his side. And the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. It is the shaking process that started January 26, 1850. That comes from Present Truth, number 9, page 72. The 144,000 for the last 175 years have been standing up for God and speaking the truth. Those who reject the truth are actually spiritually slain. They become the walking dead. Why? Because rejection of light causes darkness and spiritual death from that point forward. A good example is the Jewish priests and rulers at the time of Christ's ministry on earth. Because they rejected the light of John the Baptist, they placed themselves on Satan's side. Therefore, they crucified Christ. Here is what God says. This is from Hosea chapter 6 and verse 5. Therefore have I hewed them by the prophets. I have slain them by the words of my mouth. And thy judgments are as the light that goeth forth. By rejecting light, they are selecting themselves out of true Christianity, and thus they are spiritually slaughtered, even though they live on and are members of the church in good standing. God bless your study.